Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Campbell from Decatur PD in Texas. He has 25 years experience in law enforcement and he's doing some really cool and interesting things in the wellness space. So I'm really looking forward to having him as today's guest. Welcome to the show, Chief Campbell. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation. I was kind of like remembering some of the things that we had talked about initially, and I'm excited for all of our listeners to hear some of the things that you're doing organizationally. But I first want to start with a little bit of background on you. How did you get started in law enforcement 25 years ago?
So, you know what, growing up, I was really into the outdoors. And so I always wanted to kind of be a game warden. And then talking to people that I knew who are game wardens, they said, you work a lot during hunting season and stuff. And so I kind of transitioned a little bit from that, but had some buddies who work in law enforcement at the sheriff's department and kind of started riding out with them and just kind of got hooked. And they had some openings in the Wise County Jail. And so I applied there to be a jailer, started working with a jailer, really enjoyed that. After a short time doing that, so you know what, I'm going to put myself through the police academy. And so I did the police academy part time, where it's basically, I went from 6 o'clock at night to 10 at night. And then I went in and worked from midnight to 8 every day. Um, working nights inside the jail. It was a really great opportunity to learn, you learn a lot of the inmates that you're dealing with, you learn how to communicate. And it was just a real unique opportunity to learn through that process. And as soon as I was done, graduated from the police academy about a week after I turned 21. The sheriff's department there, they gave me an opportunity to go and transition from the jail to being a deputy.
Um, I've been talking about this subject lately about short-term discomfort for long-term gain. And that's kind of what popped into my head when you were saying I put myself through the academy and I was also working nights. And so it's this, obviously sleep is good, taking care of yourself is good. But it's this idea of you knew that that wouldn't last forever. You knew that this was short-term discomfort for long-term gain, something that you wanted to achieve. And so you put your head down, you had the dedication to, graduating the academy and entering into this profession long term. And so I think it's really interesting that you said that and it kind of popped up because it's something I've been talking about recently.
Yeah, and and it's one of those things to your point of that's not where you want to be, but you kind of picture at the end of the race, hey, this is what I want. And so you do everything you can in the meantime to get there, just buckle and down. And there were a few times of, multiple days of working. I can remember working 14, 15, 16 days in a row and still going through the academy, doing all those things. A lot of times, because it was at 10 o'clock, when I get down at the academy, sometimes I would just go ahead and go to jail because I lived at the time a little ways away. And so I would just go straight into work. And they will just say, hey, you're there. Go ahead and, start making around and helping us look people in. And so, but yeah, it's just, I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do, but I knew what it was. And it was a constant battle for about 6 months of making it happen.
Yeah. Well, something that you said that I think is really important, I want to talk about this a little bit in the context of burnout, but also being able to achieve things. So you said when you see kind of that, like the end of the race, right? Like you see where you're going. I do think, and I would love your opinion on this, but I do think that it's so important, at least for me, to have something that I'm striving for regardless of how small or big it is, to keep me going in a forward trajectory. And I think so often, sometimes we feel like we've arrived in a space and we don't really have that next thing. And I'm not saying like rush to the next thing or, like not be present, but I think that we should always have goals and things that we're striving for to avoid, that level of burnout that we know that happens. And I have been burnt out plenty of times in my life. Trust me. Like I've gone a million miles an hour and I burn out really quick because I feel like I don't have something where I'm like, this is the end goal or this is what I'm trying to achieve. Do you feel that way or what is your
I
opinion on
do.
that?
No, I do. And one of the things that, growing up, I was involved in athletics a lot. And so playing football, baseball, any type of athletic, but really football and baseball was my thing. And that was one of the deals that I learned early on that, if you write down the goals, write those down. What are your short term? What are your long term? And you can even take it a little further. What are some of your um, intermediate goals that you want to do? And it's important that you check those off because you physically at that point in time you get to see that hey you're accomplishing things. And if not, then that's where you do kind of you experience that burnout of hey you feel that frustration. I'm doing all this and nothing's happening. And so many times the reality is I think that we really are accomplishing things. We're just not necessarily seeing them,
Mm.
happen at what we think they should. And we kind of talked about a little bit when we spoke the other day. One of my, and I don't know what I said, but one of my favorite parts of um, in a movie is where he's trying to get into the University of Notre Dame over and over and over, and he's doing all these things and he's accomplishing all these things, getting an education. But his end result is the only thing he wanted to do was run out of the tunnel there in South Bend. Um, and that conversation that he had with the maintenance director in the tunnel when he quit. And, the maintenance director told him and said, hey, look, you know, you think you will see that you have accomplished so many things, but you just have your mind in the wrong place right now. But that you're going to walk out of the University of Notre Dame with it. But you're only concentrating on this. And he got burned out. He got discouraged. And so it's really important to write those things down so you don't miss anything there.
Yeah. I also like this idea that how can we take those moments to celebrate the small wins? Because to your point, I think that we have kind of learned instant gratification over time, especially with technology. And I think technology is great. But I think that everything is so instant, that we almost forget like how long did it take us to learn how to do things when we were kids? How long did it take you to be proficient in anything? We didn't have ChatGPT or AI, you had to like really learn these things. Or how long does it take to learn a language? These things are over time, but remember when we were kids and we would learn like the smallest of things and we would get so excited, because it was like, oh my gosh, I've been trying so hard to get like this one thing. And you can relate this to sports. Like maybe there was, one skill that you were trying to learn, or one time that I don't know what sports you liked, but one time where you caught the ball or threw the perfect spiral or whatever it was, and we can celebrate those wins. And I think that we forget that. Like you said, when you're just so hyper focused on what that end thing is, that you forget that all the little achievements, all the little wins along the way are equally as important because those are the things that are gonna get us to the things that we want at long term. So
Yeah.
I really like you saying that of like just also remember that, you know, small wins matter.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, all those little things along the way are the building block and the foundation of your ultimate goal.
Yeah.
That's ruined everything you do, man. Like at on your job or your life or just every day. And that instant gratification is a huge thing. We, you know, we're a society of that. Those little things have kind of lost meaning to a lot of people, but they're still valuable in what we do every day. You can't just if you're gonna climb a mountain, you can't start at the bottom and you just end up on the top.
Yeah.
There's a lot of steep climbs and other things that you got to take to get to the top. But there's so many valuable lessons along the way to help you get there and
Yeah.
make you stronger once you do get there.
And I think it's also important to recognize that people who are at the top, that it wasn't an easy climb or an easy journey to get there. I think so often we look at people who are at the pinnacle of their careers or, they've achieved great things. And sometimes we think that it was an easy road because I think that we try to make it seem like that for people, and so people get discouraged because they're like, wow, it's not easy for me. But like, look at them, they're at the top. And I think it's important to remember that like we all go through trials and tribulations. We all go through peaks and valleys. And anyone who is at the pinnacle of success or is achieving great things worked really, really hard to get there. And you can do that too, but it's one foot in front of the other, and sometimes you're going to backslide a little bit. And then it's how do you keep moving forward even through the backslides. And you have a mantra that you shared with me that I think falls really in line with this. Can you share what your mantra is?
Just being dedicated to
Dedicated to excellence. I love it. And when you said that to me, because that's what I heard too, when you were like, I was motivated, I was working nights, I was putting myself through academy, like we talked about this kind of idea of pursuit of excellence. And to me, that's mental training and that's resilience, to be able to every day wake up and say that I'm going to be dedicated to excellence and I'm going to do what it takes to get there. Do you feel like you knew from day one that that's what you were doing, that you were mentally training yourself for, the long term, or do you feel like that's something that just kind of came naturally to you?
So, I'll tell you a little step further and that, and this is the biggest question that's always kind of asked. Are leaders born or they made?
Mm,
And I think there's so many people who say, well, leaders can be made. And see, I disagree with that. I believe true leaders are born that way. But to what you just said, that there are little things that they do throughout their time that they hone those skills to make them even better leaders.
mhm,
And that's just something that I've seen over my careers. I've seen guys who really, really want to be, but they don't have that skill set. But I think that when you talk about being dedicated to it, it's something that you're constantly, it's a constant strive to reach perfection. And like I said the other day, we can never be perfect. The only Jesus was the only person who's ever walked the earth who is perfect. And then we can never be perfect, but we can always be striving for that. And when you're doing that, um, to your point, all those little things that you do, you're going to appreciate more as you get down the road and you start achieving those goals. You start reaching those things that you wanted to accomplish in your life. But I think really you're honing all of those things that you, those God-given abilities, those God-given power. You're honing those throughout your entire life. And who knows when that is? For some people, they reach those goals really early on. Others, they're working harder at to get there. But it's that constant dedication. The only way you're going to get there is to remain committed with dedicated.
yeah. Yeah, one of the things, so I agree with you. I think perfection is a fallacy. I don't think that there's any way that I will ever be perfect. And I think that that's okay. But I think that the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of trying to be perfect in certain ways is worth it, because then you're always striving to be better. But also recognizing that we're always going to fall short of perfection, and so giving yourself that grace and understanding. And I think that because of that, and maybe this is just my own perspective, but I think because I understand that I'll never be perfect, I have this mentality that that means there's always room to be better. And I think you have to have that. I think as soon as you say, okay, I've arrived, that's when you start to feel that stagnation. That's when you start to feel like everyone's kind of passing you by because now you don't have that I don't like to say motivation, but you don't have that, fire inside of you to continue to, try to be better. Um, One of the things that I told myself really early on, I think this has helped me a lot. And I think this is all wellness. I think this all relates to wellness because I think the more you better yourself, the more you learn, the more you grow, the more confidence you have, the more energy you have because it's exciting. It's exciting to learn new things. It's exciting to achieve things. Maybe it's egotistical to like want to achieve things, but I think it's exciting. And, when we have that, I think that that helps us with wellness and morale and um, but for me, and I'm relating this to my career first, I told myself there might be a lot of people who are better, smarter, but there's not going to be anyone that works harder. Like that was the one thing I thought, like maybe there are people who are a lot smarter or who have been doing this longer, or, who are maybe better at what I do, but they're not going to outwork me. And I think that was one of my strengths that I was willing because I did have big goals for myself and there were things that I wanted to do and I wanted to help people in the best way I could. And, and so I put my head down and I felt like I was willing to do the work that most people were not willing to do. I do think that in some ways it was to my own detriment sometimes, and I worked a little bit too hard. And so I've found, how to also work hard in my personal life and take time off. But for me, I agree with you. I think that a lot of the things that we're looking for are trainable. Mental resiliency is trainable. All of the physical fitness stuff that you're looking for, all trainable. These are all things that you can do, but you have to be willing to put in the work and the time and the energy that's required to get there.
Yeah, no, I agree with the wholeheartedly. That's one of the things I've got 3 girls and then now a surprise newborn too. Uh, so, but that, with my oldest, that, she's 17, she's a senior, she'll be 18 in February. And that's one of the things I really try. She's really kind of, it's that self-esteem. Um, it's understanding that, look, we're all unique in our own way. But it's how we respond to adversity.
Mhm.
Life's going to throw us curveballs constantly. You're going to get knocked down. Um, it's going to be tough, but it's about how do you respond, how you get back up, and how you respond to that adversity that you're going to be faced with, and it's okay to be knocked out.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay. We've all been there. And so you just get yourself back up and it's how do you move on, learn from those things that have happened. That's what makes you happy. That's how to grow professionally and personally. But
Yeah, I can imagine having three girls. Yeah, your hands full for sure. I've been on like kind of the baby talk recently, and I'm like, man, I'm like, I really hope I have a boy, but I'll probably end up with a girl. And one of the things that I've learned when I was younger and earlier in my career, this was, probably a decade ago, I was really broken. Like I felt like I was so shy. I'm very introverted, and I really cared what people thought, and I feel like I still do to a certain extent, but I really kind of walked around, I think, with this energy of like, don't look at me, like I'm kind of, shy and scared. And I had a moment where I realized, to your point, there's a lot of things that we can't control, but I can control how I act and I react to things. And as soon as I started trying to develop myself more, the more confidence, the more self-worth came with that. And then I realized you're going to get the same adversity. You're going to get the same challenges, whether you're responding from a space of confidence or a lack of confidence. And for me, it was so much more empowering to be like, you know what? Like I'm going to take whatever life gets at me, but I'm going to respond with as much resiliency and confidence as I can because the reverse to that was even harder. And so to me, education, self-development has been really helpful for that. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you guys are trying to do organizationally, because I know that this is a focus of yours, is how can you develop your people? How can you support your people through various training and wellness? And I've had a lot of conversations over the years, and some of the things that you said were really kind of different. And so I want to maybe just kind of tick by tick go down the line, and then anything else you want to share, feel free. But one of the things that you said that you guys are doing organizationally is you have a quiet room and you encourage napping. Talk to me about this. How did you get to that point?
So, fortunately, we were very fortunate that, we were able to build a brand new building here. So we just moved in on August 2nd. But going through the process of developing our building, that was one of the things that we kind of wanted to incorporate as much mental health into it, along with the physical, into all of our workspace. And so one of the things that we did is make sure that we incorporated quiet rooms. So we have two quiet rooms. We have a quiet room that is in dispatch, that's right off of the dispatch center. And then we have another quiet room that's in the back that a patrol has. I've made it clear to my staff that, look, I remember how it was work mine, and why it happened. You come in, we work 12-hour shifts, you work 6 days. You got family things going on. So a lot of times you're going to be missing out, on some much needed experience. And we've got a spot. I would much rather my officers come in here. If they need a 30, 40-minute power nap, go in that room, kick back, take your 30, 40-minute power nap, get refreshed, and then head back out. It's, it's a lot better for them. It's a lot better for the family. It's so much better for all of them. Plus, it's like in for dispatch, if they take a bad call, and they just need a place to kind of step away, once the call to step in there, sit down, just relax. We've got warmable lights in there, really different color tones and things inside the rooms to kind of help with that. Just that mental aspect of stress that's involved in our job. Like, as much as we can say, we're going to take work home, don't bring work, or don't bring home to work. The reality is that doesn't happen. You still have a life outside of here. And so we really wanted to ensure that we kind of address that. And so it's important for me to put up that. I remember that. Shower around 2 or 3 in the morning, you got young kids, you're having to go to school stuff. I understand. So, we thought it was important as we to provide a space that we can recycle the part of that.
Yeah. One of the things that I heard is that if you get less than, it was like if you get less than 6 hours of sleep per night, that it's as if you're operating with a point oh 0.08 BAC. Have you heard something like that? And
Yes,
so,
I've heard that before. And there have been several studies and things that have done around the country that suggest that sleep deprivation is very similar to being intoxicated on alcohol.
yeah. And obviously you guys are not intoxicated, and it's this idea that it's reaction time, it's, decision making. And
Mhm.
um I really, and I've heard this before, and I really kind of stand by this, and I would love your opinion, but to me, it sounds like it's better for you guys to give them the opportunity to reset than to put them out on the streets where they might not make an effective decision, or they might have a slowed reaction time. And it's a matter of safety. When they're out there, it would be better to take care of them and have a 30-minute break than it is to just work them the entire time and throw them out on the street if they aren't in a position to do so mentally. So, is that kind of the motivator behind it?
Yeah, no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, that's, everything that we do, first on the city side, I would say probably your police department is the most liable of all departments, just because of the nature of our job. And when we're putting officers out there that we don't have, we're not training them right, that's the problem. If we're not allowing them to be in the best shape, that's a problem. If we're not allowing them an opportunity to reset when they need to, whether that's mentally or whatever it may be, that's a problem. And so the little things that we can do to spark different, it just helps. But you can't put officers out there when their brain is not performing at a top level.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because when we get to that point, your decision making is affected. And the decisions that we make are so many times involve life and death, quick, very, very serious decisions. And you want to make sure that your staff and everything is operating at the highest level.
Yeah, 100%. So the second thing that you said that you have is color-coded carpet. Tell us
Yeah.
about this, because I was like, I've never ever heard of color-coded carpet in an organization. So what was the motivation, the purpose behind that?
So again, this was kind of one of those deals that we looked at in the new building was distinguishing work zones from non-work zones. So everywhere in our building where we have carpet and all the administrative offices to dispatch to patrol and CID, we use different color tones in the carpet to kind of lay out what is a work zone and what is a non-work zone. So that way, you know, you step over into this color, it's work.
Mm,
And then when you step out, you know what? It's a refresh. That's no longer work. Leave that in that zone. And so again, that's just kind of a, you know, to help with the mental wellness, overall mental wellness of our staff. As we gave so many tours and stuff to the department now, just, you know, our community and everybody else, they're kind of the same way. They're like, that's just a really cool idea. And it's in some of the areas it's very subtle, and you don't even realize that that's what's happening. But that was really our intent behind that was to create those zones of work and non.
yeah, I think that is a really cool idea and so creative, and it's so simple. It's something that everyone can do, obviously, if you're in a position to change the carpet, but it's these ideas, right? How can we think outside of the box and how can we implement things that are going to help with mental wellness in creative ways? And so having those zones of like, okay, turn your work hat on because, this is time for work, but then when you're over here, you can decompress and you can breathe a bit. I really like that. I thought that was really creative and interesting. I've never ever heard that before.
Yeah, so like in dispatch, we use kind of it kind of got a gold camp around the outside, and so for dispatch, they're colored with kind of that gold line. We use and they add in we got for the food. So yeah, there's a separation like the running down the length of our admin hall. There's a blue line all the way down it, and it culminates into my office. And then as it splits my office, I have my soft seating area on one side of the blue line, and then on the other side, I have my desk. And so
Interesting.
again, when we're sitting over in the soft area, that's a different atmosphere in that area, and as compared to on the desk side where it's all work. And then dispatch, like I said, when the dispatchers can make step over that will go carpeting area, they know they're moving out of work and so
That's so
a
interesting.
reset in a way. No.
Yeah, even you splitting your office in segments, that's really interesting. That's so cool. Anyone who's listening, I'm sure that this is the first time that they've heard of that too. So I think that that's so cool. Okay, so the third thing is you have a policy for physical fitness, and you've had really high engagement for the wellness initiatives that you guys have put in place. So tell us a little bit about your physical fitness policy and what has your buy-in and participation been for these initiatives?
Yeah, so again, we're so fortunate right now that we have this brand new facility. And within that, we created a committee of our officers for just our entire department. And their sole purpose was to create what we work out there at Campbell Park, Newman, Missouri. So they picked out all the row machines, all the treadmills, all of our bench press machines, all of those things, that whole entire community kicked out, priority. So that was kind of the first step of getting staff buy-in. I didn't have a single say as far as what they did. The only thing I told is that, hey, the equipment has to be monogrammed. It has to have our badge and stuff on it. Just so that way, it's honest. That is, but I. But other than that, they did every bit of it. And then we just took it to the next level. Once we got in here and did a lot done, because that was a fitness policy as well. So we're taking it kind of step by step. Hopefully within the next year or so, we're going to be able to incentivize and buy it back in some form or fashion for those who achieve certain levels within the policy itself. But when we did this first round, we had about 90% of our staff. That includes dispatch. It's really funny, just talking about it. One of our new dispatchers that we hired here recently, she jumped in on doing the program. And I saw her this morning. She had come up and she was actually running around the block this morning. And so again, it's just those little things that I see of our staff, taking that next level with the fitness side. And, I think, taking that step further is on an administration side. I sat down with my command staff early on and said, hey, look, if there's an expectation that we're going to have them do it, there's an expectation that I have of us that they have to see us do. And so, being a smaller department, my command staff, myself, assistant chief, and theory on captain. So myself, the assistant chief, we work out. My two captains really hadn't before, but since they both get in there, and I said, look, if I want us there at times to where everybody can see.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's just building that buy-in. Since we've sent a couple of guys now to UPF, so for row instructors. So we're going to start incorporating the EPO's growth standards into our policy as well for our fitness. And so it's just taking those little steps of getting that buy-in of anybody. But it starts with on the leadership side, to then see that we're doing it too, and it's not that we're forcing them.
Yeah. It's when you said that to me initially, when you were like, yeah, we had 98% of buy-in and participation, I was like, wow, that's huge. There are a lot of agencies that I have conversations with that really struggle with that, where they have incentives, they have, certain things in place, and they are getting a couple people to show up or a very small percentage. And so I appreciate you sharing kind of how you started doing that. But it sounds to me like you started with leading by example and getting the buy-in from leadership first to then trickle down into everybody else. And I'm curious, what was that conversation with your leadership team like? How do you get buy-in from leadership? One of the things that I've heard is that sometimes leadership is the hardest, especially if you have, some people who didn't grow up in that time, people who maybe have a different thought process behind it. How do you convey the message that it's bigger than them and that it's about, the culture and the wellness of the organization?
Honestly, I think the reality of it is that once you get into a leadership position, particularly on a command level, and here, there is you already somehow you're embodying like a servant leader anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's not that difficult really just to ask somebody like one of my captains, listen, hey, look, I don't care if you're in there and all you do is get on the treadmill. You know what? People will see that. And that's just a little thing. And so, but sentence, treadmill, it's weights, it's all these things of being in there. And I think that's it. I mean, it's just, if you're in a leadership role, you really are some kind of a servant role. Because you're not going to make it there unless not some quality you already put. And so I think it's really easy. It really is. It's just throwing it out there to them and saying, hey, look at it from this angle.
Yeah.
Our expectations can be different to the staff. That we don't have the same expectations of them.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you know, leading is leading to me is really not that difficult. It's just getting people to see a bigger picture, getting them to do things that otherwise they may not have thought was possible. Um, and it's to me, it's not difficult. It's just
Yeah.
you get out front sometimes and set that example for them. Let them see that you're doing, and it's they'll jump on board if you run everything right. Um, they'll jump on board.
I like that you said see the bigger picture. And I think that sometimes we get lost, sometimes we don't see the bigger picture for ourselves. And so for other people to show that to you, I think is so powerful. And I've said this so many times because, and it's interesting. I was just having a conversation earlier today, and there was someone who was saying, people won't do it. They don't do it, they won't do it. No way, no how. And I was like, I feel like people want to do these things if they're led in the way in the right way, or if the conversation is productive. I've never met anyone who wants to feel terrible. There's,
Right.
I've met people who do feel terrible as a product of like maybe not focusing on these things, or not having great leadership, or not having some sort of intrinsic motivator to do these things. We've all, I think, been in those spots where maybe like we kind of let things fall off, and we kind of get in a routine of not taking care of ourselves. But I've never ever met someone where I'm like, do you genuinely want to feel really bad physically and mentally? There's no one, that I've met. And maybe there's someone out there, but I've never met anyone that way. And so I think that deep inside, we all want to feel as good as possible for as long as possible. And a lot of times, to your point, it's bigger than us. There's whenever I talk to people and I ask them, what is your wellness why? Why is it important for you to be physically and mentally well? 9 times out of 10, it's for somebody else. It's
Right.
not for themselves. Even if they say something, they'll say, well, I want to. I just had a guy, this is really kind of funny. It was kind of cute. He was like a younger officer, and he's like, I have a baby and I have a wife. And he's like, and, I want to be here as long as possible for my kid. He's like, but I also want my wife to be attracted to me. So, I want it for my wife. And I was like, and he's like, I don't know if that's silly. I was like, I think that's a great answer, because that answer was not selfish in a way. It was like, hey, I want to make sure that I show up for my family. My wife's attracted to me. I'm taking care of myself for her, but then I'm also here as long as possible for my kid. Most people I talk to, it's not about them, it's about their family, it's about their team, it's about being safe and effective out, on the streets in your career. And so I think that if we can remind everybody that it's not necessarily about you, there is a bigger picture of why we're doing these things. Obviously, like you want to feel as good as possible for as long as possible, but it's probably because you want to feel like that for other people.
Yeah, and then again, to kind of come back to what we even started talking about is that in that same, the same space is that, what, if you're writing down some goals, what your goal is that, what, you want to be here as long as you can for your family and you want to be here for your kids. Well, what are some of the other little things that in the trade-off for being in better physical condition?
Mhm.
You're going to be spending probably some more quality time with them, either playing, going to the park, doing some things. And so that just, it's kind of a trickle down of setting a goal. Hey, look, as far as my fitness level, I'm going to do these things. But at the same time, you're knocking off some other little things that you're not even realizing that you're doing to achieve that big goal, that big picture that you're wanting to do.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of reverse engineering, and trying to identify, okay, what is that big goal? Like you said, maybe at the very end, like, and I like that you said short term, midterm, and long term goals, because I think that's really important. But let's just say you're like, okay, I want to be able to crawl around with my grandkids. I want to be in my old age, I want to be retired, and I want to have life left in me. Okay,
Mhm.
well, what do we have to do to get there? What are those actionable things so we kind of work ourselves backwards? I
Yeah.
think one of the things that I have done myself, but I also see in others is also like hitting the gate like sprinting and then like fizzling out. And so I think that if you can work yourself backwards, but then you can have small actionable steps today, that's going to compound over time. How can we create longevity, and keep that? It's kind of like the tortoise or the hare, right? Like who wins the race, and you have like these. Have you seen those things on Instagram where they actually do
Yeah.
it and like the rabbit like runs around in like
Hmm.
circles and then like slow and steady the tortoise gets to the end. And so that's how I think of wellness. It's like, okay, what are things that we can do today? I love that you said maybe you start just going to the park with your kids one day a week and you're super present. You put the phone down, you're just super, super present. You play with them, you have fun. How can we then take that one time a week and make that two times a week or three times a week? And then how can we do that with our physical fitness? Maybe it starts by walking around the block. Maybe that
Hmm.
dispatcher was like, I just want to like get the habit of just going outside. Maybe that's
Right.
step one. It's not even walking around the block. It's just like, how can I have like the awareness to step outside and get some fresh air?
Yes.
Then how can I add to that? Maybe now I'm walking around the block. Then maybe I'm running around the block. So I think small actionable things that we can build on over time are going to help us to achieve all of our goals.
Definitely each little step you take, you just feel a little bit better. And then, but again, you're not even recognized. And so it's sometimes important to say, okay, look, do what you're saying. This is my goal. I'm just going to stop walking. Well,
Hmm.
then before you know it, walking, you're going to feel so good. You may try jogging, and then jogging turns into a little bit more. And so just little things can make a big impact. And
Yeah.
we see that all the time. And everything we do, we just don't correlate it together, to be honest.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Brittany Runs a Marathon?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so it's kind of like a quirky movie. It's on Netflix. I think it came out like years ago. But it's this story of this girl who was not taking care of herself. She was partying and drinking and she had gained a bunch of weight and she went to the doctor and the doctor was like, "Hey, like, you need to start taking care of yourself." And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about, denial phase, like whatever. And then it's this whole progression of how she set a goal to run a marathon and kind of the steps that it took for her to get there, and the backslides, some of the things. And so I think it's about giving yourself grace, but it was a really good depiction of this idea of motivation and dedication and resiliency because like we said before, peaks and valleys always. It's never going to be like a smooth ride to the top. And so I think that that movie was kind of a really good. It's definitely not like the movie you quoted where it's like you're crying and it's so inspirational, but it's definitely like I think a really good depiction of giving yourself grace but keep going.
But, well, and I know, and I'm going to jump ahead on you, but it kind of fits with where we've been going. One of the things that you said, I think about, what is something that you would pass on to a younger generation. And since we had that conversation the other day, my thought has been to understanding that this job is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mhm.
And to what we're saying is that, marathon runners, there's hills, so there's certain parts that are a little harder than others. You got to push yourself. There's endurance that's involved in that. And running distance is both mentally challenging as much as it is physically. And so that kind of incorporates every little thing. And so that's my thing that anybody needs to understand that if you're going to have a successful career, particularly in law enforcement, you have to understand from day one that it's a marathon.
Yeah.
You can't come out of the gate sprinting because you're going to burn yourself out. And you're just going to get so disappointed at a reason. And so understand that it's a marathon. And there will be ups and downs. There's going to be harder, parts throughout the race. Um, that you got an attitude, you get the, but at the end of the day, if you prepare yourself, knowing too that it's a marathon, um, and when you get to the hopefully been successful in of navigating all those things that we believe success and
Yeah.
so that's the other aspect that we don't do a very good job of. We don't prepare our people for retirement at all. And so I really wish, that when I had started in law enforcement and 25 years ago, on we're preaching more financial, um, stuff for our guys. The same thing. You need to be preparing now, and not going out and spending money on stupid stuff. Not drinking too much and partying. All of those things that I see a lot of guys when they're starting out with careers. Be smart, but understand that it's a marathon to be in this profession.
Thank you. I actually think that those are really great words of wisdom. And a couple things that you said that I kind of wanted to touch on is one, the importance of being proactive with everything, and that includes mental, physical, financial, all of it. How can we get in front of it? And I've had so many conversations with the younger generation who have quite literally said, I don't have to worry about that now. That's a problem for later. And I promise you, if you are a young person listening to this podcast, later comes a lot quicker than you think. And putting in place proactive measures that are going to make your future self happy is only a positive. Even if you don't think you need it, do it because you'd rather do it and later be like, I'm so glad I did it than to not do it and have the opposite. And like later in life, be like, man, I wish, now I can't retire. Now I can't do these things that I want to do. And I really am a firm believer, and this popped up as you were like talking, is the more hurdles you get over, the more hills you run up, the more adversities that you're able to overcome, the more hard things you do and you come out the other end of it, the more confidence you have that you can achieve hard things. And I think that that's what keeps you going, understanding that you have the ability to push through and to overcome the hardest things in life if you keep going. And so never give up, keep going. And the more hard things you do, the more hard things you know you can do.
Yes. And to that, my favorite quote of all time that lost battles don't always go to the stronger, faster than Aaron. But sooner or later, the man wins, the man wins. And so I kind of go along with what you said, it's not always going to be the strong. It's not going to be the fast. It's going to be the one thing. And it's not really, it's not about, Vince Lombardi said that. But I don't think he was necessarily talking just about football and rinsing off. He was really referring to rock in general.
Yeah.
And that, what, you're going to get through the things that are hard and challenging because you believe you can.
Yeah.
And we're all going to experience, we've said already, having that mental and that resilience to go to self-movement. So it just makes all the difference. But you have to be prepared for this. Here's a wrap. And, I wish 25 years ago somebody would have sat and said, "Hey, look, you know what? If you could pay $50 a month out of your paycheck and just put it, it's unreal about that with you 25 years today."
Yeah.
And so luckily, we try to do that. We should be doing that. And again, that's just another one of those ways. They're trying to get our officers in the better spot. Because the last thing I want is to have officers having to work in their 60s, 70 years old before they don't have an option. This profession is really cruel and dealing with the body and mind. You don't need to be wanted a profession to not prepared, not anything. That's what you're stuck with, and you have nothing else in life.
Yeah.
My old chief, he told me one time, he said, "Look, never give up your hobby. Always have your hobby. Have your things outside to do and be prepared sell month to month.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here. And, it's interesting, someone else quoted Lombardi recently too. And I don't know if it's just an inside thing that you guys are all like fans, but I've been convinced now to buy his book because I think you're right. I think he talks a lot, not just about football, but about leadership and resiliency. And so I appreciate everything that you've said throughout our podcast. I think you're doing a lot of really unique things, and I'm sure anyone who's listening learned something from today. So thank you for coming on here and sharing your words of wisdom. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Of course.